By God, the Almighty and Omniscient, Friedrich Paulus swore that he would speak only the pure truth before leaving this world. Yet no one could have anticipated the revelation he delivered in his final moments. The world of history and research was thrown into disarray. Scholars who spent decades studying the intricacies of the Second World War were left speechless, and even those who had chronicled his life most closely struggled to comprehend the weight of his admission. It was a confession that seemed almost impossible to emerge from a man who had stood at the very center of one of the most decisive battles of the 20th century. How could a man whose entire existence revolved around order, precision, and military discipline have harbored a secret of such magnitude? The answer, finally given, was the last thing anyone would have expected. A revelation so profound that it reverberated far beyond the boundaries of his personal story, shaking the very foundation of historical understanding. For decades, he had carried the burden in silence, maintaining the image of a devoted, methodical officer. And yet, in the quiet of his final moments, the truth surfaced, an extraordinary revelation that turned conventional narratives upside down. What he admitted would forever leave historians grappling for explanations, researchers scrambling to revise theories, and the public re-evaluating a figure once thought entirely understood. Friedrich Paulus was born on September 23, 1890, in Breitenau, a small, unremarkable town nestled in the rolling hills of Hesse, Germany. His family background hinted at nothing extraordinary. His father was a schoolteacher, a man of modest means and strict order, while his mother hailed from a lineage of hard-working farmers. It was a life defined by routine and stability, far removed from the chaos and drama that would later envelop Europe. Yet from the earliest years, Friedrich exhibited traits that would define his existence: meticulousness, an eye for detail, and an almost obsessive adherence to rules. Unlike many boys of his age who sought adventure, excitement, or youthful rebellion, Friedrich was quiet, reserved, and deeply reflective. He observed the world around him with a cautious eye, weighing actions carefully before engaging. Even in play, there was a precision to his movements and a seriousness to his demeanor that distinguished him from his peers. Friends and neighbors remembered him as polite and disciplined, someone who followed instructions meticulously and avoided any semblance of mischief. There was nothing in this small-town upbringing to suggest that Friedrich Paulus would one day navigate the complexities of global conflict or stand at the heart of military history's most consequential decisions. And yet, this unassuming early life, grounded in order and routine, laid the foundation for the man who would eventually command attention on a scale far beyond Breitenau. In his youth, Friedrich dreamed not of military campaigns or battlefield heroics, but of the open sea. The Imperial German Navy fascinated him with its promise of disciplined structure, the rhythmic hum of life on deck, and the vast expanse of the ocean. It was a dream that seemed to align perfectly with his methodical nature. However, circumstances would soon intervene. Friedrich's health was less than robust, and he lacked the family connections that might have secured him a place among the naval cadets. These limitations closed one door, but as is often the case in the lives of disciplined men, they quietly steered him toward another path: the Army. By 1910, at just 19 years old, Friedrich made the decision that would irrevocably shape his destiny. Joining the German Army, he entered a world defined by hierarchy, order, and precision, a natural fit for someone whose life had always revolved around structure and adherence to rules. The transition was seamless in temperament, if not in ambition, and set him on a trajectory that few could have predicted. Upon joining the German Army, Friedrich Paulus was assigned to the 111th Infantry Regiment as an officer cadet. Here, his inherent qualities, observational skills, steadiness under pressure, and reliability proved invaluable. He was not the type of man to charge recklessly into battle or seek glory through audacious acts. Instead, he excelled where detail and careful planning mattered most. His superiors quickly recognized his aptitude for staff work, the often overlooked realm of military operations where logistics, supply chains, and planning were as crucial to success as courage on the battlefield. Though unremarkable to outsiders, Friedrich's meticulous approach and unwavering dedication laid the groundwork for a career that would later place him at the epicenter of history's most defining conflicts, the outbreak of the First World War in 1914 was the ultimate test of Friedrich's abilities. While many young officers sought distinction on the front lines, Friedrich found his calling in staff roles, managing operations, coordinating supplies, and overseeing the intricate details of military planning. To some, this work may have seemed less heroic than leading charges across no man's land, but it was indispensable. In the chaos of war, the ability to maintain order and anticipate needs often meant the difference between survival and disaster. Friedrich's reputation grew quietly but steadily. Superiors noted his attention to detail, his unwavering accuracy, and his capacity to impose structure on chaos. Soldiers under his guidance may not have seen him as a figure of legend, but in the machinery of war, his influence was profound. The war tested not just courage, but intellect, and Friedrich's methodical nature proved perfectly suited to the challenges that emerged. Outside the military, Friedrich Paulus' life was no less deliberate. He married Elena Rosetti Solescu, a Romanian woman of noble descent whose grace and strength complemented his disciplined personality. The union connected Friedrich to the aristocracy of another nation, broadening his social influence and providing stability that many officers lacked. Elena's presence in his life anchored him amid the turbulence of military service and societal upheaval. Their marriage was one of partnership and quiet strength, a constant amidst the shifting landscapes of war and politics. In her, Friedrich found not just a companion but a stabilizing force, allowing him to navigate both personal and professional challenges with composure. The conclusion of World War I left Germany shattered. The Treaty of Versailles imposed harsh limitations on the military, reducing the Reichswehr to a mere 100,000 men. Many officers were dismissed, careers ended abruptly, and the future seemed uncertain. Yet Friedrich Paulus endured. His unwavering reliability and methodical approach made him indispensable in the newly restructured army. During the turbulent years of the Weimar Republic, he quietly climbed the ranks. Unlike officers who sought attention or political influence, Friedrich maintained a focus on duty and discipline. His ascent was unremarkable to the public eye, but strategically significant. In an era of instability, the calm, organized officer who could be trusted to maintain order became increasingly valuable. By the 1930s, as Adolf Hitler ascended to power, Friedrich Paulus had positioned himself as a reliable officer whose focus remained on planning and organization rather than politics. He was the man who could map troop movements, calculate supply lines, and anticipate the logistical needs of an army in motion. These qualities rendered him indispensable, yet they also revealed a limitation. He was a master of structure, not of political maneuvering or personal ambition. In a world increasingly driven by charisma and ideological fervor, Friedrich's methodical competence set him apart as a stabilizing force. He was respected for his precision and dependability, qualities that would later prove both his strength and his constraint in the face of historical events that demanded more than mere obedience. Friedrich Paulus' life was a study in contrasts. From a quiet, disciplined childhood to a career built on meticulous planning, he earned respect without flamboyance, influence without seeking it. He was obedient yet independent in thought, cautious yet capable of decisive action when circumstances demanded. His ability to operate within structured environments made him invaluable, yet history would later test the limits of this very trait. In him, the disciplined officer and the quietly ambitious man coexisted, shaping a life defined by reliability, precision, and an unwavering adherence to duty. During World War I, Friedrich's experience as a junior officer in staff positions proved formative. While he did not lead charges or seek frontline heroics, his management of logistics, planning, and operations ensured the Army functioned efficiently even in the most chaotic circumstances. These roles, often overlooked by history in favor of battlefield drama, highlighted a fundamental truth. Wars are as dependent on organization and foresight as they are on courage and valor. Friedrich's contributions, though quiet, were essential, laying the foundation for his later prominence in the German military apparatus. Even the most disciplined obedience can be tested by the currents of history, and Friedrich Paulus' life would demonstrate this truth. The confession he offered at the end of his life, whispered in his final hours, left historians and scholars scrambling to reassess his entire legacy. It was a reminder that even lives defined by structure, order, and precision could conceal secrets of immense consequence. From his unassuming beginnings in Breitnow to the command rooms of Europe's great battles, Friedrich Paulus' story is one of methodical diligence, personal stability, and the quiet but profound impact of human discretion. In the end, his life stands as a testament not only to the importance of duty, but also to the enduring mystery of what lies behind the mask of discipline and obedience. As the shadows of a new war fell across Europe, Friedrich Paulus found himself thrust into circumstances far more complex than the world he had navigated after the First World War. Germany's military, now larger, more aggressive, and increasingly driven by ideology, demanded efficiency and absolute precision. Paulus, by now a seasoned officer, was called upon to apply his methodical talents to the increasingly volatile operations of the Wehrmacht. His role was clear: manage logistics, coordinate troop movements, and ensure that supply chains could withstand the unpredictable fury of modern warfare. Unlike many of his contemporaries, he did not crave the limelight. Instead, he focused on the machinery of war itself, the invisible gears that determined whether a campaign succeeded or failed. His early involvement in Wadi Sut highlighted his unique ability to operate under pressure, translating complex operational plans into actionable strategies. Officers who relied on him knew that a meticulously prepared plan by Paulus could be the difference between tactical brilliance and catastrophic collapse. Friedrich Paulus' imprint on history became tangible in several key operations where his logistical foresight was critical. Battles that seemed decided by the bravado of generals often hinged on the precision of his calculations. He anticipated enemy movements with uncanny accuracy, ensuring that resources reached the front lines at precisely the right time. One notable campaign illustrated his meticulous genius: a complex maneuver requiring coordination across multiple divisions, reliant not only on combat readiness but also on food, ammunition, and medical support. His superiors admired his calm in the midst of chaos. Soldiers under his indirect command often remained unaware of his decisive influence. And yet, behind every plan, Paulus wrestled silently with the tension between the orders he was given and the consequences those orders would unleash on human lives. Each strategic decision, no matter how logically sound, carried with it a moral weight that he alone seemed to bear. Friedrich's position inevitably brought him into proximity with Adolf Hitler and other high-ranking officials. These encounters were fraught with tension. Paulus, a man of precision and logic, often found himself balancing obedience to the Führer with personal judgment. Unlike more flamboyant officers, he rarely sought personal attention, but his insights could not be ignored. In meetings where strategy was debated, he would quietly present figures, timelines, and logistical requirements, leaving others to interpret the moral implications. There were moments when he subtly questioned the feasibility of certain orders, navigating the dangerous terrain of defying directives without incurring wrath. These encounters were exercises in silent negotiation, where prudence and discipline became a form of survival. Even in the presence of a man like Hitler, Paulus' calm demeanor and unyielding focus earned grudging respect, though never friendship or trust. Perhaps the most compelling aspect of Paulus' story is the internal struggle that accompanied his professional life. Every operation, every calculation, and every plan carried with it human consequences. He witnessed the suffering of civilians, the exhaustion of soldiers, and the moral compromises forced by obedience to orders. In his diaries and private reflections, he often questioned whether meticulous execution was enough to absolve one from the ethical weight of war. He wrestled with decisions that required balancing duty with conscience, often choosing paths that minimized unnecessary suffering while still fulfilling military objectives. This silent ethical tension became a defining feature of his life, a private rebellion that contrasted sharply with his outward obedience. It was the quiet struggle of a man who understood the machinery of war better than most, yet remained acutely aware of the human cost, hidden within its calculations. As the war progressed, Paula's reputation evolved. Among peers, he was revered as a planner whose mind operated like a clockwork mechanism, capable of foreseeing every contingency. Yet there was a subtle mystique surrounding him. His colleagues recognized his brilliance but also sensed an enigmatic distance, a private depth that few could penetrate. Unlike generals who sought political favor or public recognition, Paula remained devoted to the principles that had guided him since youth: discipline, precision, and methodical execution. This consistency in character earned him loyalty, respect, and at times suspicion. He was a man who could be counted on to act with exactitude, yet never fully revealed the weight of his conscience. The final years of Friedrich Paulus' life were marked by quiet reflection. The chaos of the world had subsided, leaving him to confront the personal and historical consequences of his decisions. In retirement, he often revisited the choices he had made, the operations he had executed, and the lives that had been affected under his indirect guidance. His relationship with Elena, steadfast through decades of upheaval, became a cornerstone of his final reflections. Their life together had provided the stability that allowed him to navigate moral and professional complexity. In these years, he began to reconcile the man he had been with, the man he wished he could have been, a reconciliation that ultimately led to the confession he had carried in silence for decades. It was in the twilight of his life, in a quiet room filled with the scent of books and memories, that Friedrich Paulus spoke his final words. Sworn by God to convey nothing but truth, he revealed the secret that had haunted him, a confession that illuminated the ethical compromises, the calculated risks, and the silent dissent that had shaped his career. He admitted, with calm clarity, decisions that contradicted the narrative of obedience that the military and history had assumed. Historians would later describe the moment as seismic, decades of research and assumptions overturned in a few quiet sentences. Friends, family, and scholars alike struggled to reconcile the meticulous, obedient officer with the man who had quietly resisted, morally navigated, and ethically questioned the machinery of war. It was a confession that redefined his legacy, revealing a depth of humanity that had remained hidden behind layers of discipline and duty. The reverberations of Paula's final confession reshaped historical interpretations. What had once been considered a straightforward example of military obedience was now recognized as a complex narrative of human conscience operating within rigid structures. Scholars reassessed the outcomes of battles he influenced, reevaluating how much of success and failure rested on his silent judgments. Modern interpretations of W2 logistics, strategy, and ethical considerations began to integrate the nuance Paula's life revealed. His story became a case study in how meticulous planning and moral awareness could coexist, demonstrating that even in the darkest times, human conscience finds a way to assert itself, quietly shaping history. Ultimately, Friedrich Paulus' life transcends the particulars of military history. It is a study of the tension between duty and morality, obedience and conscience, structure and human empathy. His disciplined approach allowed him to navigate the most chaotic periods of modern history, but it was his private reflection, his careful moral consideration, that defined him as a man. The lessons embedded in his story extend beyond the battlefield: the importance of critical thought, the weight of ethical responsibility, and the enduring complexity of human action. Paula reminds us that even within the rigid machinery of war, the human spirit, quiet, careful, and conscientious, remains indelibly present, shaping outcomes in ways history may only partially see. After decades of service, Friedrich Paulus' life extended beyond the battlefield into the intimate world of family. His marriage to Elena Rossetti Solescu had provided not only stability, but also a lens through which he understood duty, loyalty, and the impact of personal decisions on those closest to him. Their children grew up in a home permeated by the quiet rigor of their father's character, disciplined routines, careful reflection, and a deep respect for responsibility. Though they were shielded from the full horrors of war, they observed the subtle weight of decisions their father carried, his pensive silences, meticulous planning of even mundane tasks, and the unwavering moral compass that guided his life. Elena, ever vigilant, preserved not only the household but also his personal papers, diaries, and letters, understanding that they held the key to a man who operated in the intersection of conscience and duty. In later years, Friedrich's descendants would grapple with his dual legacy, a man who ensured the survival of countless soldiers through careful logistics, yet silently carried the moral weight of the consequences of war. Their reflections were never simple. They navigated the duality of pride in his discipline and admiration for his conscientiousness, tempered by the shadows of decisions that affected thousands beyond their home. It was in the quiet of retirement that Friedrich began to document his experiences with painstaking detail. Diaries and letters, never intended for public eyes, became his private repository of reflection, ethical debate, and personal confession. Within these pages, he questioned orders he had executed, examined the consequences of meticulously planned operations, and debated the balance between duty and morality. He recounted logistical successes with clinical precision, but paired them with candid observations about the human suffering that those successes inadvertently caused. Historians who would later gain access to these writings were astounded by the depth of insight they revealed. Paula was not merely an officer executing orders. He was a thinker, a man wrestling with the moral dimensions of obedience under extreme circumstances. These documents illuminated a facet of his character that had remained hidden for decades, revealing the tensions between discipline and conscience that defined him. Each diary entry added layers. To a man who outwardly appeared composed and methodical, but inwardly navigated a constant struggle between ethical responsibility and military obligation. With the posthumous release of his Diaries and Final Confession, the world of historians, scholars, and the general public was thrown into debate. How should Friedrich Paulus' legacy be judged? To some, he was the epitome of duty, a man who followed orders, maintained discipline, and ensured operational efficiency. To others, he was a morally conscious figure navigating a flawed system, quietly resisting where he could without openly defying authority. Controversy arose over interpretations of his choices during World War II, particularly regarding operations that led to civilian suffering despite strategic success. Scholars argued about whether his meticulous execution of orders absolved him of moral responsibility or if his private reservations indicated a higher ethical awareness. Public perception was equally complex. Those who revered military precision admired his competence, while others criticized him for not taking a more vocal stand against questionable commands. This duality, the obedient officer versus the ethical thinker, defined the debate, cementing his status as one of the more enigmatic figures in modern military history. Friedrich Paulus' life offers enduring lessons in leadership that transcend the context of war. His style was defined not by charisma or flamboyance, but by reliability, foresight, and methodical planning. Leaders under his influence learned the importance of anticipation, calculating every possible contingency, preparing for the unexpected, and ensuring that every operational decision was informed by both logistical necessity and ethical consideration. Paula demonstrated that leadership could coexist with conscientious restraint. An effective leader does not simply execute orders blindly, but evaluates the moral consequences and takes responsibility for outcomes. Modern military scholars often cite his example when discussing the integration of ethical reasoning into command decisions, emphasizing that operational excellence and moral awareness are not mutually exclusive. His leadership principles, discipline, foresight, ethical reflection, remain instructive for those navigating high-stakes environments today. The ethical dilemmas Paula faced resonate far beyond the 20th century. In contemporary discussions about military ethics, civilian protection, and the limits of obedience, his life serves as a cautionary and instructive tale. He navigated a world where strict adherence to orders could lead to human suffering, yet he also recognized the necessity of structured decision-making to prevent chaos. His private struggle highlights a universal question: when is obedience justified, and when must conscience intervene? Modern military theorists point to his experience as evidence that the cultivation of moral judgment is as critical as technical skill in leadership. The tension between structure and conscience, duty and empathy remains profoundly relevant, illustrating that the lessons of history are not static. They continue to guide the ethical frameworks of decision-making. In the present day, Friedrich Paulus' story underwent a renaissance, as historians rediscovered his diaries, letters, and posthumous reflections. Archives that had long cataloged his logistical reports and operational assessments now revealed an entirely new dimension, the moral and philosophical thinking behind the man. Scholars revisited campaigns and battles with this context in mind, reassessing outcomes and ethical implications. The integration of his private reflections transformed simplistic narratives of obedience and efficiency into nuanced accounts of a man negotiating the human cost of war. Modern scholarship credits Paulus' rediscovered writings with inspiring a deeper understanding of the moral complexities faced by military officers, proving that even in historical analysis, the human element cannot be ignored. Over time, Friedrich Paulus became a figure not only of historical study but also of cultural interpretation. Documentaries, books, and films explored the tension between his obedience and conscience, dramatizing the inner conflicts revealed in his diaries and final confession. Writers depicted him as a man walking the tightrope between duty and morality, a character whose disciplined exterior masked profound ethical deliberation. These cultural portrayals emphasize the human side of military history, providing audiences with insight into the quiet struggles that shaped pivotal moments in the 20th century. Through art and literature, Paulus' life became emblematic of the moral ambiguities faced by those who operate within rigid hierarchies, blending historical fidelity with dramatic narrative to communicate lessons of conscience, duty, and ethical courage. Ultimately, the life of Friedrich Paulus transcends the specifics of his military service. His story is a testament to the complexity of human character, the interplay between discipline and conscience, and the enduring importance of ethical reflection in positions of responsibility. From his careful upbringing in Brighton to his final days of reflection and confession, Paulus embodied the tension between structure and moral awareness, demonstrating that human integrity can persist even in the most chaotic circumstances. His legacy reminds us that true leadership involves more than technical skill. It requires moral vigilance, careful judgment, and the courage to recognize the consequences of one's actions. Beyond military history, his life offers universal lessons about the weight of responsibility, the importance of conscience, and the quiet, enduring power of disciplined reflection in shaping the course of human events.